You're listening to the Famvestor Podcast. If you're looking to raise your family with intention, gain financial independence, and live a life of true freedom, you're in the right place. Join us as we explore together how to create thriving families, because strong families are the cornerstone for a world at peace.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Famvestor Podcast. Today, we have very special guests. Actually, Andria was Sunri's matron of honor at our wedding, so that's awesome. So awesome to have them as a couple here. Victor, too. So Victor and Andria Quesada-Rogers joining us on the show. We thought they'd be great guests just because, we're great friends, but also because they have a kind of a very insider view on the topic that we want to talk about today, which is living multifamily generations in one household. Pros and cons. We get this question actually a lot. It's a very specific question, I guess because we do it. We live in a multifamily generation household where we have Sunri's parents upstairs from us, and we live on the ground level, kind of separate units, but all in the same building. And we just wanted to have a open, honest discussion about the pros and cons.
Right, and they've experienced a lot of this as well, where they've lived in different time periods of their lives with family or separate from family. So we wanted to get their insight on what kind of experience they had in all those different experiences during their life.
Yeah, so why don't we just start? Andria, Victor, welcome to the show. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourselves?
Thank you.
Thanks.
You go first.
So, Andrew and I met in my hometown in Gloucester. We were introduced to each other actually by our parents. And
we've been together. We've been a couple for almost 10 years now. It'll be 10 years in like a week, 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Wow, congrats.
Yeah. And Victor's a teacher. He's a high school biology. No, this year physics special ed.
As a public school teacher in Newark, it has been a very fun experience, but there are some daunting challenges there.
Nice.
And I've been home full time with our 3 kids who are 6, 3.5, and just turned 2.
So you have your hands full for sure.
We
know that. We know that feeling too. We've got our 3 as well. So to start us out, I want to go to very back in the very beginning. I know that when you first were married, you lived with, if I'm correct, Andria, your parents, correct?
Right.
As a couple?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We had a similar experience as well. We lived with
my parents,
Sonny's
and just
parents.
one bedroom. We just lived and just in their apartment. Yeah. So similar with you guys too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were living in what used to be my childhood bedroom, and it was in my parents' apartment. Very early newlywed young couple.
Yeah.
I was still in undergrad, finishing up college, and Victor.
I had just started grad school when I came down, and
getting your teaching certificate as well.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to jump into what, as a couple, what made you make the decision to go that route rather than finding your own apartment? If you can think back, I know it's like 10 years now, but I'm curious to know the mental process you went through in deciding whether to go out and get your own space versus staying with family, and how did you decide whose household to stay in, your parents or his parents?
Right. I think that, obviously finances came into it because I was still in school. He was starting grad school and getting his teaching certification. So neither of us was bringing in an income really, or nothing substantial. And we wanted to focus on finishing school and getting our degrees. And it just kind of made sense to live with my parents and save and be able to just focus on that instead of going through everything it takes to set up our own household.
Right. And there is so much that goes into that, I think a lot of young people, if they haven't yet lived on their own, when they come into a relationship and they start considering the option of finding an apartment, there's so much you don't think about. Added additional costs, furnishing your place, paying for all the utilities, paying for, luxury things like Netflix and your phone bills and all sorts of things
I feel like people really just think about, the pros, which is like unlimited freedom, come in, go whenever you want. No one's asking questions, and you have your own personal space to fill and decorate as you please without any input from anyone else, which is all great. But like you said, there's so many other things that go into running a household. Who's going to make every single meal, and who's going to, take out the trash and clean everything up and maintain everything. So it's definitely a very big impact depending on what you do.
Right. And I know for us, we really appreciated, we, like you, started out living with Sonny's parents, and we found the relationship to be really helpful. I think his parents appreciated having us around, and it certainly helped me get to know his family in a deeper, more intimate way than I would have probably ever had the opportunity to do had we not lived with them. Did you find that to be similar for you as well? You got to know Andrea's family, Victor, perhaps better through this experience?
And was that a good thing?
Yes, I definitely got the chance to get to know Andrea's parents, their sort of nuclear family culture, and have a much deeper insight into where Andrea came from, because I was where Andrea came from. Mm-hmm. It was a wonderful experience in many ways, but it did come with a lot of challenges. I had spent 4 years away at college getting my undergrad degree prior to this. And so then moving back in with essentially like parental units, even though they weren't my parents, they still felt kind of like my parents in many ways. And so that was a difficult adjustment to kind of come back to.
So tell us a little more about that adjustment, because you experienced what it was like living on your own for 4 years. So then this is in a way kind of stepping back, as you're saying. And how did you cope with that?
Yeah, I got to be an RA in my junior year of college, and that was like the first time that I not only had no parental oversight, but also no roommate to even consider or worry about or anything. And it wasn't like I would get up to anything crazy, but it was just that sense of complete freedom. That sense of not having anyone else even be worried about you for a while. And I mean, that never really came up at that point in my life. But then when I went to live with Andrea's parents, then there was somebody who would stay up late and be worried if I wasn't home by a certain time.
Right.
Even if Andrea and I were both out together, it's like we're both adults, but then there still is somebody who'd be worried if we're out at 11 o'clock at night because we'd gone out to see friends in the city. So that was a shift that I had to become accustomed to and work with.
Yeah, I think that's a big consideration to take. It's just like the type of parents you have and the type, of, the personalities and the dynamic and how that's going to work. Because I know, your family seems to be more like that. It sounds more like that, where they want to check in on you. Are you guys going to be home for dinner? Should we cook for you? Things like that. And then my parents were just very lackadaisical about the whole thing. You're home or you're not, we're going to cook this amount of food. It doesn't matter if you're going to be here or not. And
it's on the stove.
Right. And I think because of that, we had a very good experience with living inside their house.
Right. So that's definitely, for anyone considering this option, we can share our stories here, but everyone's experience is unique to their particular family dynamics. So you got to take that into consideration if you're considering this option, for sure.
Definitely. Yeah. I think one thing that really kind of was a bit of a struggle or an adjustment when Victor first moved in is just, I think, a lot about his family culture is different from my family culture. So not only was it like him getting used to living with other people again, or living, or having like roommates to have to consider. It was also a matter of then learning our family culture and learning our family language. And even for me, some things that he did, I was like, why are you doing it this way? Obviously, this is understood. This is how you do this particular thing. Right. And it kind of like, I think it's different than if you're just two people coming together as a couple and learning about each other. He had to kind of like learn my family. And I think for whoever's coming in, they could easily feel like the odd man out or outnumbered or kind of like more stressed because they don't know your family culture. So I feel like you have to be even more considerate of the outsider, the person who's coming in,
I definitely agree with that.
whoever's family it is.
Right.
Yeah. And on that note too, it's in college, the big thing for me was that every time that I had a roommate, it was always, okay, we're both moving into this house together. We're all moving into this, into this apartment together. And so then it was all of us kind of melding our expectations and negotiating our standards of where things belong and how things need to be and working together in a lot of ways. But here I was one new piece being integrated into an apartment that had been lived in continuously for
So there were all these set
20 years.
Right. All these set expectations, set ways that things are being done, and you need to ramp up and learn them real fast because they're not changing.
Yeah.
So how long did you guys live with your parents, and when did you move out, and what was the deciding factor there?
I think it's funny actually,
Almost
because it ended up being at least like about a year and a half, I would say, but like a few months into it, or pretty early on, it was getting difficult, and there were lots of points of tension, and we even went out looking for our own apartment at one point. Like we took, I think, a couple of weekends to go looking for apartments, but of course our budget was really ridiculous. So when we went out, it was kind of like a reality, shock that of what we saw were like the worst, grimiest, tiny little studio apartments, and still we'd have to pay a lot of money and all these things. So
maybe it's not so bad at mom and dad.
Yeah.
We could do this. But is this worth it? Compared to
if we just like stick it out another year, like we can still live comfortably and finish out our degrees and then, go from there. But so I think in the end, it was about a year and a half that we were living as a couple with my parents.
Can you give us an example of one of these points of tension that came up that was just like, oh, let's go find an apartment?
I think like Victor kind of touched on, this one incident happened where we stayed out really, really late. So we went into the city, and we went to visit friends of yours, actually, and we were meeting them. And, we were out, and it was like probably like a summer night. So we were, in the city. We went to a restaurant. We were walking around for a long time. It got really, really late. And then I think we missed the last bus that would have taken us straight home. So we had to even take a different bus and from the city. And we ended up having to walk like 2 miles or something. Anyway,
in the middle of the night.
Yeah, in the middle of the night. We got home really, really late. It was maybe like 2 o'clock in the morning or something.
It was kind of a misty, drizzly. It was warm. It was nice.
Yeah.
It was a cool walk.
And we hadn't thought to really let my parents know, because we thought, oh, they probably went to sleep. They went to bed. We don't want to disturb them. And if they were concerned, they would be calling us or something. So we just, got home and then went to bed. But then the next morning, like my parents pulled us aside and they said that they'd been so concerned and so worried, and why did we stay out so late and what we were doing that whole time. And it just like brought up all these issues, and we're like, we didn't understand what the big deal was. I think as parents now, we probably understand their heart a little bit better, but at the time we were like, what's the big deal? Like we had each other, we were safe. So I think that was, and then my mom kind of wanted to impose a curfew on us. Even though we were like in our early 20s and we were married. We're like, what? But, at the same time, we're like, okay, it is their house, their rules kind of thing.
Right.
And if, they don't want us coming in past a certain time because they're worried, and also maybe we'll disturb them and their sleep, then we have to respect that. Yeah. And we kind of realized like, okay, well, if we want to do things our way, we have to live in our own place, ultimately. So that was just kind of like a funny story, but one example of
having a curfew at the age of 23, 24.
Right. And being married, you're not out partying and living a lifestyle that's not,
Yeah,
in
we're not-
keeping with your parents' values.
Yeah.
You're with your wife,
exactly.
We went
But-
out on a double date
It was a double-
in the city and then stayed up late talking and then walked home.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But anyway.
No, I hear you there. I think that is a very valid point too, in that it's a hard, we talk a lot about our adjustment as a couple living with our parents, but honestly, it's a hard adjustment for our parents too, to move out of the space of parenting their child and saying, these are two adults who are married and are an independent unit, and we happen to be living in the same space, in the same home. It can be very difficult for parents to make that adjustment, especially if there hasn't been a time in the middle where they got used to your absence, because then it becomes like, oh, well, yesterday you were still my daughter that I was keeping an eye on, and today, well, you're still my daughter. Where do I make this change,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a year and a half later, or a year later, you guys find an apartment. How was that?
That was it was a lot of things at once. I mean, it was like
Finally getting the chance
we
to take our
graduated, we
honeymoon.
both graduated and then that summer we had like a wedding celebration for our family and friends who couldn't be at our marriage blessing, before. And then you got your first full-time teaching job, and then
And the commute was killer.
yeah, and then we decided to go out and get our first apartment, and then I was also pregnant.
Exciting year, a lot going on.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
So but yeah, we moved into our own apartment, and it was about a 45-minute drive from my parents, from where I grew up. And at first it was exciting. I would say it was fun. It was kind of like we felt like, oh, we're finally real adults, like we have our own place, we get to do things our own way. And but of course with that came like the stressors and the responsibilities of having to pay bills all on our own. I know how to cook.
Do I know how to actually budget and meal plan and think through what's in the refrigerator and actually make sure that we're being economical as a home? No.
Yeah.
And
so it was kind of a lot of skills I felt we had to learn really quickly before the baby came. And and it was your first full-time teaching job, so you had like your work stressors.
Yeah.
And then it was a completely new area too for
we didn't
us.
know
So it
any
was
of the
kind
parks.
of like
We didn't know any of the
we didn't know the area, and we also kind of didn't have our support network because we were a 45-minute drive away from my parents and from most of our friends. So we kind of lost, that immediate support network too.
That's rough.
Was the big push to actually moving to an apartment that you were going to be having a baby, or was that not really a factor?
I think it was mostly to be closer to your job.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, I'm surprised. Like I hear a lot of times people move because they're having a baby, and I feel like
that's the catalyst of, now that we're expecting a child, we need to get our own space.
Right. And I just feel like, I don't know, in my mind, that's like one of the worst times to be moving because, like you said, the support network is so key. And I feel like you don't really realize that until you do become a parent and realize, just having an hour of someone's help is a life changer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And actually, like, I think if we had really thought that through or had that wisdom, now in hindsight, we realize that, but at that time, we didn't really think that fully through. And I ended up waiting the last 2 weeks of my pregnancy at my parents' house anyway, because it was closer to the doctor and to the hospital where I was going to deliver.
Yeah.
And then even after, like when our eldest son was a newborn, I was feeling really lonely in the apartment by myself when he was at work all day. So I ended up going back and staying with my parents again for like another 2 weeks just to have some company and some support. So I think, if you're having a baby, I think it's a definite consideration to think about whether you'd like to have that support, the support of your parents and extended family.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I
And
think there's a lot of blessing and benefit that comes from having extended family, especially with a young child, because you are making such a huge adjustment to your life now. It's all new territory for you as a parent, and just having someone who will, make sure there's food on the table when you don't have an ounce of energy left,
Yes.
and you don't have to think about, oh, what am I going to eat? What's my husband going to eat? Or as you said, someone who can bounce the baby for an hour so you can get a nap, or let you get out of the house and clear your head for a little while to just relax when you've had a really long night with the baby. That was something that we were really appreciative of when we were with your parents during that time.
Yeah, absolutely. Just thinking about how much effort that takes and how much time that takes. Like, we got that support from my mom. Came down for a week, I think, and your mom was also down for a week. But I was practically drowning with work, trying to figure out how to get caught up and keep caught up, and get my first set of lesson plans like fully fleshed out and through, and keep a classroom running. And I probably jumped back into going into work sooner than was wise. And as a result, Andrea was alone.
Yeah, I don't think you took any time off from work.
Yeah, it was
like 3 days.
It was like a week. It was 3 days a week, something like that. Something very small. Something that doesn't make sense at all now.
But when you're a new parent, you don't know what makes sense
no
or not.
idea. Yeah.
Right.
Unknown unknowns, right?
Yeah.
It was
That is
not
rough.
wise on that front. And then, like, even though we're able to share a lot of responsibilities, just the way it hits sleep, it's just, it just knocked her out. And it would have knocked me out too if I wasn't such a good sleeper.
Right. Yeah, you don't
Not fair.
You don't know what it means to be sleepless until you have a baby.
So you guys, you had your own apartment, and then you lived there a number of years, right? And then you kind of have the unique perspective of you went out, bought a place, and then included your parents to move into that place, right? I'm curious, how long did you live in your own apartment, and then you make the shift to buying this kind of more multi-generational living housing arrangement?
I think Philip was over a year old.
Yeah, it was a year
It was
and
a
2
little
months.
shy of 2 years, I think, that we were living on our own. And then we were kind of thinking, okay, we want to get a house, but again, like, what can we afford that's just with our income? And then we did want to be closer to my parents again, and we wanted to have that kind of built-in support network. And so we just kind of came to this decision to move in together.
And it was greeted with a lot of enthusiasm.
I think a little too much enthusiasm. I don't think we fully thought everything through once again.
It was an opportunity to support one another, to be a whole that was greater than the sum of its parts. We had the opportunity to buy a place that offered us, everybody would have their own bedroom, and some of the other amenities that we're really looking forward to. And like, I still had stuff at my parents' place, and we were trying to like consolidate and like move forward into that next stage of life where we're, fully establishing ourselves in a house and in a household. And so we tried to make this come together, and we found a place that was very close to amenable to what our needs were at the time.
And how did your parents, I mean, I know that they moved with you. How did they respond to the initial inquiry, whether they were interested or not? Did they find that once you moved out to your own apartment, they kind of missed that closeness when you had been living with them, and they looked forward to this experience again?
I think they definitely missed us, especially because we were, further away. Maybe if we were in our own apartment, but only like 10, 15 minutes away, it wouldn't be as much. But My dad was really especially enthusiastic
Yeah.
about moving in together. I don't know if it was getting the house. I don't know if it was the lawn that became the love of his life or
It was
what.
definitely the lawn.
But
It
he
was
was very
definitely
enthusiastic.
the lawn.
You get a house with a lawn, I'm there.
Yeah, exactly. But I think my mom had a few more reservations, and I think maybe she was thinking about all the things we were thinking about that we only found out through like trial and error later. But she did really want to support us. She wanted to help,
Yeah.
take care of our son. We only had one child at the time. She wanted to be there for us, to be the grandmother and to help support us in that way. So I think they were really thinking of like, okay, in this way we can help support our children and our grandchildren by moving in together.
Yeah.
But we were thinking, I think, very in terms of our immediate needs, and we weren't thinking long term enough. We weren't thinking about,
That's really
okay,
true.
well, how many more kids are we going to have, and are we all going to still fit in this space? And is it going to work out? So there were a lot of factors that we kind of found out through the trial and error of it.
So how was it when you guys all moved back in together? You have the child, and how was that dynamic? Was it like, oh, this is great, now we have family here, the support network living right in the house? How was it, like all rainbows and sunshine, or just tell us a little bit about it?
I have to say there was a lot of wonderful things that came with it. It's not like we got like, oh boy, full-time childcare just magically appeared in our own living space, but just a lot of little things were smoothed over and worked better because there was another set of adult eyes and hands in the house able to take care of little ones. Philip definitely benefited from having a lot of interaction, a lot of conversation, a lot of words, being spoken to him and in multiple languages. And just having the opportunity to have somebody who wasn't going to go out show him how to put on his own shoes and put on his own sweater and have that patient time. So that way we're all ready to leave the house at the same moment instead of having a toddler running around with muddy shoes or into the rain with no coat on.
Yeah, I think looking back and not having that support now, because we're living on our own again, we can see how all those little ways, little things that kind of added up to be really helpful overall. But some things that were really challenging that I think, again, also were specific to our family situation that might not apply to everyone. But like, for example, my father works at night. So he has to sleep during the day. And to be able to sleep during the day when you have a young child or children who are noisy and can't be made to be quiet, caused a lot of strain and stress, because we didn't want to disturb his sleep. And even if he said he wasn't disturbed by it, we always felt like, oh, we have to keep quiet or,
right.
So that was challenging.
On the one hand, like we were aware of this fact ahead of time. So it wasn't like we were blind to this moving in, but having the children's bedroom be on the opposite corner of the house from his bedroom was not enough because his bedroom was still close to the kitchen. So again, it's really specific to our personal situation,
but it's definitely something to consider, whether what are your schedules all like, and are they going to work together or work against each other? Are you all still working? Are some of you home? Because my mom was retired. She had retired, and so she was home a lot of the time, and she was able to provide childcare even for a period of time when I went back to work. But there was also overlap where I was home, and it kind of was like I didn't feel always the freedom to say bring a guest over or have a play date, because I knew my dad had to sleep and my mom was home too, and I didn't want to disturb her peace or or vice versa. And I think there were times where they probably felt the same and similar, where they wanted to bring a guest over or, have a visit or do something, but they were afraid of disturbing us and our schedule and stuff like that. And also the house physically we were living in, everything was very intertwined and shared. Like we were sharing a kitchen, we were sharing a dining room, and even the bathroom, we had 2 bathrooms, one of which was supposed to be primarily for my parents, but it was the only one with a tub. So that's also where we had to bathe our children. So, we ended up kind of being there. So I feel like also the separation of space wasn't clear enough and wasn't set up in a way that was beneficial to both parties.
Yeah. So in your situation, you really truly were living all in the same direct household, sharing all these public spaces together.
We were sharing a refrigerator.
Yeah, that was a big point of tension.
Really?
It wasn't the worst, but it was really challenging. Like it's one of those things where they wanted to incorporate more greens and more leafy vegetables and things like that, and then all of a sudden they need more than half the space in the refrigerator. And then, but we are trying to take care of a whole nuclear family. There's 3 of us, 4 of us, and we need refrigerator space too. And
I think the funny, we laugh now, and this speaks to how, like, if you are going to live in this way as, multi-generational family, that if one little issue crops up, like, deal with it immediately and be proactive about it. Because, like, for us, we would be like, we need more space in the fridge, but we never actually.
But we would talk to each other about how we need more space in the fridge.
Right. And it was like, and it started building up as like this huge issue that was like festering, And then looking back, we're like, why didn't we just get a separate fridge? Like, it's like such an easy problem to solve. We could have had 2 fridges. We could have like just said, we need to divide this space in the fridge or something like this, but we weren't dealing with it proactively, and we didn't want to, like, I don't know, we didn't want to be confrontational maybe, and so it became like this huge issue. But it didn't have to be, obviously.
In terms with living with someone's parents, who do you think should be the one to kind of proactively engage the parents? Is it the spouse of the parent, or is it the child?
I think it depends. Yeah. I think it depends on what kind of relationship, everyone has, what your dynamic is. Yeah. It depends on the issue. Like, if something's really bothering you, but it's not bothering me, I would say, like, well, you have to be the one to talk to them about it. Yeah. But yeah, I think it really depends on what the situation is.
Yeah, I feel like it's important to integrate as much as possible when it comes to, the dealing with each other. It would not be good to always have Andrea as a go-between between me and her parents. First of all, there's some things that wouldn't have made sense, like the obvious things, like I'm reasonably handy, and if like the water heater went, at one point, and so then that's obviously me talking to Pai, because he's the one who would be doing the help on that end, and that's sort of an obvious thing. But even other things, like if something bothers me, it's important that I have the ability to really interact with them and not have to funnel that through Andrea. It would have been unhealthy, I feel.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And also, like, there's a lot of other history there going on between how you're perceived as, like, I raised you, I changed your diapers. And sometimes that can come up too. It's like, maybe it's not as serious.
Right.
Sometimes you might have more leverage, but you might also be stuck with things in the past.
That's true. There's a certain way you were brought up, and perhaps the way your spouse feels something should be done may be not the way your family would have handled it. And so it can be tricky to navigate those situations when talking with your parents. So I definitely understand that. Yeah, it's so important for everyone in the relationship to be able to feel they can speak freely with one another. And you brought up that point about, like, complaining privately amongst yourselves about things that were points of contention, but never bringing it to the front, and then it festering and turning into like a resentment that builds. And I think that is such a relevant point to make there, the importance of trying to deal with the individual circumstances as they arise, because if you don't, they just build and build. Too many little things lead to a big thing, and then it can cause unnecessary conflict in the household.
Totally true.
In terms of setting boundaries, so it sounds like from what I'm getting from you and from our own experience too, there's an important aspect of sometimes you need to set a boundary, even if it's something as simple as, this side of the fridge is yours and this side is ours, or, don't, in our situation, since we live up and down, but kind of interesting in our house, we have a reverse osmosis water filter. And so my parents love to come down to get their filtered water from our unit rather than the tap water in theirs. And they, for a while, my dad loved coming down right at the kids' bedtime. I don't know why. It just, I guess the house all of a sudden became quiet, and he thought it'd be a good time to come down and get his water because all the ruckus wasn't going on anymore. But it would just mess up our bedtime routine because all of a sudden we got them calm in bed, and their bedroom is right off the kitchen, so they'd see him come down and in, and they'd be in bed calm, we'd have the lights out, and we're like just about to finish it out, and then all of a sudden, oh, Grandpa's here, yay, hi Grandpa, it's like total reset of the whole 45 minutes we just had and calming them down, and so we had to have a conversation about that of like, we know you need your water, but be more mindful to get it earlier in the evening, because that's like the worst time you can come down right at bedtime. It's really disrupting our family's nighttime flow. And at first he felt really bad. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I feel like a horrible person. It's like, no, there's no need to feel guilt here. Just the understanding that, this is what happens at 8:30 p.m. in our house, so it's not a good time to come for water. So setting those boundaries, having those conversations can really help. And I feel like once he understood that, we were complaining for months. Like, son could be like, why is he always coming out? He's always coming to him for his water. And I'm like, well, honestly, we haven't told him not to,
Right.
He doesn't know. So once we had that conversation, I feel like he's made a lot more effort to be mindful of that and to really not come in the late evening hours, and it's been better for the relationship too.
Right. And I think it's like any new relationship, because I feel like even like you probably experience this, like when you're newlyweds, you have all these expectations that you want your spouse to meet, and then when they don't meet them, you're so disappointed. But then if you think about
me.
they should just
would just know.
They should know, right? They why don't they just know this? But if you think about it, it's totally unrealistic to expect it if you've never voiced it, if you've never made it obvious. So it's the same thing. It's like, if whether you're living with your parents, your in-laws, or siblings, whatever, like we were just expecting my parents to somehow magically know that we needed more space in the fridge without ever saying anything. So you have to be willing to just bring it up, and sometimes it's like you get maybe nervous or anxious, like, oh, it's going to cause a rift, but it's sometimes just as simple as saying, it's just having a simple conversation.
Yeah.
Also, my intuition is that like having a conversation about it with your spouse feels like progress. It feels like work. It feels like we're doing something about this, but you're just spinning your tires.
Yeah.
That it's not that issues take twice as long because now there's two conversations you need to have. It's that they can take a lot longer because sometimes you just chew on them for a while longer. And other times, if you bring up an issue, then you have that conversation with your spouse. But then if you bring that up with your parents, then they need to have a conversation, and then they need to get back to you. So it can really multiply the amount of time that it takes to resolve something if it's not as simple as we need more space in the fridge, or we need you to not come in at bedtime, or whatever.
Right. And your story and our story are simple examples, but there's obviously more touchy experiences as well too, in terms of like privacy and like sharing space. And so, yeah, it can be a sensitive matter to bring those up. And sometimes it will require a conversation between couples and getting back to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Andrew and Victor, thank you so much for kind of sharing that progress, all those steps. I'm wondering now, having gone through it all, living, in a room with your parents, moving out, getting your own place, your own apartment, and then, buying a house, integrating the whole family again, and then once again, moving out again to your own place. What is your conclusion here, now having 3 kids and seeing this whole journey? What do you, and I mean, you can't speak to everyone's parents or their dynamics here, but what do you personally see as, the best fit for your family? And what could make that even better?
The dream situation.
Yeah, a dream situation. I mean, for us, it's really important to be near our family. Our parents, especially, because they're our children's grandparents, and we want them to have that closeness. We want them to have those experiences and that bond. But I think we've learned a lot from these, different stages of life living with my parents. And we recognize now, that we need our own independence as a nuclear family, and they need their own independence, as a, couple who's getting older in their retirement years. So I think we are open to living together again, but ideally it would be more of there would be more separation. Like they would have their own kitchen and private bathroom,
right?
Bedroom and a little living area, and probably even like a separate entrance or even a separate little cottage on the same property, something like that, where we each can feel comfortable, with whatever's going on in our lives, whether it's guests coming over or schedules or whatever. But we're still close enough to be with each other and support each other and be together.
Yeah, to be close to the next door neighbors can be really wonderful.
Right.
There's a lot of positivity that comes with that. But for our personal situation with my father-in-law's sleep schedule and just the nature of noisy children, needing that extra space, needing to have that, their bedroom wall is unshared with anything that we're living in. It is just an absolute necessity for as long as that situation continues. So as much as I appreciate the opportunity to get support and to reciprocate that, to check in on them, to help take care of them, and that opportunity to build that bond and that relationship with our kids, just the love that they have for their grandparents is beautiful to see. But they need their own space. And to have that chance to sort of retreat into your own privacy and into your own rooms, so to speak, so that we have a place to be comfortable in for yourself is a necessity. Right. And without that, it didn't work out for us.
Right. Yeah, I think you make very valid points there for sure. We can definitely resonate with that as well. The importance of, separate but together. Where you're there to support each other, to have time together, shared memories, shared moments, and for the grandparents to really know their grandchildren and vice versa. So much beauty there, but it's so important for us to all be able to respect each other's place in lives, where our parents are elderly and they have a different set of needs and a different pace of life than a young family. And they already did the whole young family thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. They might not want to do it again.
They might not want to do it again, or at least not full time, right?
Yeah.
But of course, they want to know and be a part of their grandchildren's lives and their own children's lives. So, the separate but together is such a valid and I think very important point for everyone to really feel fulfillment in this kind of arrangement. So, Andria and Victor, in rounding out our episode here today, I feel like there's so much great knowledge and information here for those thinking about this situation. But to kind of condense it all, can you tell us what would be your top 5 benefits of living together with extended family, and then perhaps top 5 perhaps cons that you encountered, and just for something to look out for those who are thinking about this sort of arrangement?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the top 5 benefits of living together with your extended family, definitely financial savings.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's splitting costs or being able to support each other in some way financially.
Mm-hmm.
Having that support network where you can lean on each other and help each other with, either childcare or taking care of, aging parents, something like that.
Mm-hmm. And then closeness, like being able to really develop that family culture of understanding where your spouse comes from. And then, when something comes up, you can see, oh, you get that from your grandmother, or,
Mm-hmm.
within my own children. That's really beautiful to see.
Mm-hmm.
And then passing on of skills and wisdom. My mother-in-law is really deeply into arts and crafts, not just like, oh, cutesy arts. Like every time that somebody gets a card from her, they always ask her, like, why don't you go into business for yourself? So it's literally being gifted a work of art.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's passed that on to our children as well. She's done that with them, and that's really wonderful to see.
A memory they'll remember, no doubt, for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, and same with your dad being a really handyman, passing on those kind of skills and wisdom that the older generations have garnered down to the younger generations.
Mm-hmm.
And then in that same vein, like shared resources and shared responsibilities, it's kind of like the weight is lifted off of each individual because you can kind of share certain resources and responsibilities amongst all the adults.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a silly example, but just for yard work, I personally don't really particularly care about lawns, but my father-in-law loved taking care of the grass in the front and backyard and made it a beautiful place for the kids to run and climb and jump and play games.
Mm-hmm.
And I took care of most of the pruning and the landscaping as far as the trees and the bushes went, because I have some experience with that already. So just being able to split something simple can really make that a communal activity as opposed to a chore that needs to be done.
Yeah. And then the cons or the things that you might have to compromise on if you are living with extended family is definitely privacy.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to have as much privacy as, if you're living on your own. You might have to have conversations in whispers or, you just might not have that privacy that you would. And independence as well, to just make decisions solely on your own.
Based on your own plans.
Yeah,
like if
based
a
on
job
just the
moves
two of you. Yeah.
and you've established a life together as a whole family, then where does that leave your in-laws?
Much more interdependent if you're living together in that way, interconnected. You're not going to have as much flexibility maybe in, what you can do in the household or with noise, all these things that we kind of touched upon. It's just not as flexible and not as much freedom to do, just what you want as an individual or as a couple. Anything else?
Those are the biggest. Those are big ones.
I think those are the biggest
kind of
ones.
Umbrella over any specific instance that I can think of.
Okay. Well, Andrew and Victor, thank you so much for coming on the FamVestor podcast. If people have specific questions they might want to ask, is there a way that they could reach out to you?
Email, I guess, is the easiest way. Andria, ANDRIA.Rogers@gmail.com.
And Victor Fencer @gmail.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.